The President. Dr. Chi-kwong, I understand that you've raised an issue and asked for a debate which is of public concern, but I understand that the Health Services Panel have arranged for a meeting on Friday to discuss prevention and control of COVID-19 in Hong Kong. All members have been invited to attend that meeting and discuss the item in question. I believe there is ample opportunity for members to follow up on the issue. I therefore believe there is no need to adjourn the Council and debate on the matter now. As members understand, including this meeting, we have only 2 more meetings before the end of our term, and we still have a heavy agenda. And on this basis, I rule that the motion moved by Dr. Chi-kwong is not in accordance with the requirement under Rules of Procedure 16(2). Government bills. This Council now continues with the second reading debate on the Employment Amendment Bill 2019. Does any member wish to speak? Mr. Leung Yiu-chung. Mr. President, I speak in support of the Employment Amendment Bill 2019 and its resumption of second reading. There are 3 salient points of the bill. First, to extend the statutory maternity leave from 10 weeks to 14 weeks, and for the additional 4 weeks of ML, the employee will receive 4/5 of the wages. For the original cap, $36,822. I understand that the government intends to move an amendment to raise the cap to $80,000. Second, the definition of miscarriage will be updated from before 28 of pregnancy to before 20 weeks of pregnancy. In other words, female whose child is incapable of survival after being born at or after 24 weeks of pregnancy will also enjoy maternity leave. The third salient point is that employees who have attended medical examination in relation to pregnancy will be entitled to sickness allowance if they are able to produce a certificate of attendance. The administration proposes to establish the post or create a post of Chief Labor Officer under the Labor Department to process the payment of maternity leave, and a contractor will be engaged to take up the work. In other words, a contractor will be engaged to pay out wages to employees under ML. But we believe the task should have been taken up by the Labor Department instead of going through the tendering process for the participation of a third party, because this will lead to a waste of money. The proposal was therefore vetoed by members on Wednesday. Although members have struck down the proposal to engage a contractor to handle the payment of maternity leave, we are nevertheless in support of the bill. According to the government's estimate, after passage of the bill, around 27,000 female employees will benefit from the new measure every year. So if the bill is passed this year, many female employees will stand to benefit. I recall at the last council meeting, members from the Loyalist camp told the government line. They accused pan-Democrats of filibustering deliberately to stall the passage of the Employment Amendment Bill 2019. However, since January, pan-Democrats have been questioning Professor Law Chi-kwong, asking when the bill would be tabled into the Council. In the end, the administration's decision was to circumvent the House Committee and tabled the bill directly into the Council, and for the bill to be referred to the Panel on Manpower for discussion so that the bill can resume its second reading at the Council meeting here. We have very rarely seen this practice being adopted in the Council. It has undermined the established practices, and as usual, the administration has the backing of the loyalists, and as such, they could just bulldoze through, and it's really questionable whether the government is popular. Our criticism is this: we are not criticizing the amendment in the bill. We criticize how the bill has been handled and circumvention of the electoral procedure, because without due process, in the future, any draconian bill can get into the Council as the government sees fit. There is no need to go through the House Committee. The bill can just be referred directly to a panel of the Legislative Council. So how does the government regard the Legislative Council? Is there still any respect for the order of the Council? Or is it that the government can now trample on the Legislative Council however it wants, such that there is no credibility at all? Mr. President, I need to emphasize once again that we're not against the Employment Amendment Bill itself. Rather, we do believe the bill can give better protection to employees, and hence we believe further improvement on the bill should be made out so as to better protect female employees. However, the problem is, on this occasion, the administration did not allow the setting up of a Bills Committee. Usually, after a Bills Committee is set up, we can hold public hearings and invite deputations and individuals to express their views. But not this time. No public hearing was held. No member of the public was allowed to express their view on the bill. We're supposed to have a public mandate. We're supposed to collect views from the public. Since the anti-extradition bill movement in June last year, all the way to the national security law in Hong Kong, we now see clearly how the government is afraid of the people. In the legislative process, there was no discussion in our community regarding the national security law. Even the chief executive, Carrie Lam, admitted that she had not seen the full text of the national security law either. We had no alternative but to accept it in full. If it goes on, we're not doing justice to our people and to the Council. We all witness how the Employment Amendment Bill 2019 has circumvented the House Committee. Maybe this is just a trial from the government's perspective, so that Hong Kong people now see that we have no longer rule of law but rule by man, and the government can do anything to its liking. We wonder whether we still have high degree of autonomy. Mr. President, I think we've entered the age of white terror. No matter how we resent something, the administration just ignored us, just like the Employment Amendment Bill 2019. The government has undermined due process in this Council. However, we will not be deterred by the chilling effect. We will continue to voice out our objection. As for the content of the bill, as I said at the outset, be it increasing the number of weeks for ML from 10 to 14, updating the definition of miscarriage, and for employees undergoing medical examination in relation to pregnancy to be entitled to sickness allowance. All these measures seek to provide the protection to female employees and allow them more time to recuperate after giving birth. So I support these amendments because they will provide great benefits for female employees. However, does it mean, even after passage of the bill, that the government is providing sufficient support to female employees? At the moment, under Cap 7 of the Employment Ordinance, pregnant female employees enjoy 10 weeks of maternity leave, but it was enacted 25 years ago. On numerous occasions, we urged the government to review the ordinance, to no avail. The government just ignored our requests. Now, the government seems to be handing out a largesse by increasing the number of weeks of ML from 10 to 14. Still, there is much more to be desired. For example, ML pay will be kept at 4/5 of the average daily wages. In other places such as Taiwan, Singapore, South Korea, these employees get a full ML pay. Well, I think we can just go through the motion. I will urge the government to review as soon as possible, and then the government will tell me that they're going to review on a regular basis, which means 25 years later. And it's rather unfortunate that mothers in Hong Kong do not enjoy any child care allowance or child care leave. Soon after the end of the maternity leave, female employees will need to go back to work, and they wear two hats as a mother and as an employee. That brings a lot of stress on them. They suffer mental stress and physical exertion because they need to take care of the baby as well as going to work. And we need to come up with ways to help lift them out of the plight, especially when we attach importance to employment-friendly policies now. The government should consider providing more help to working mothers. And as I mentioned just now, regarding the cap of $36,822 per employee, the government proposes to increase the cap to $80,000. However, it's just half the job done, because there should not be any discrimination. All female employees should enjoy statutory maternity leave pay in full. Mr. President, fathers would like to stay home and look after their families as well. Just recently, the paternity leave period has been raised. Still, we are quite some distance away from other countries. As a result, working fathers cannot share the workload of mothers. Well, take Taiwan as an example. Female employees enjoy 8 weeks of maternity leave, but more importantly, each parent can take paid childcare leave up to 6 months, and also earn 60% of the wages, and also continue to take up to 2 years of no pay leave. In 2011, in mainland China, after the maternity leave arrangement was put in place, female employees enjoy a long leave period. And because of the two-child policy, they've increased the benefits. Apart from 14 weeks of maternity leave, mothers also enjoy 30 days of leave in bonus to encourage childbearing. And for at the provincial levels, some of them enjoy 120 days or even 180 days of leave. And for mother of twins, they can have a bonus of 15 more days. So I urge the government to conduct a review and make reference to the practices in other countries. Even after passage of the bill, we need to consider why we're still lagging behind other countries. Mr. President, we must not only stop at passing the bill, we must also review family-friendly policies. For grassroots parents, many of them struggles to make a living to keep their children fed, and they have to work for long hours. And very often they find it difficult to take care of their children. And in recent years, many grassroots parents have told us that it's very difficult to receive childcare services in the community. As a result, many parents have given up their jobs to stay home and look after the children. In August last year, the Secretary admitted the insufficient childcare quotas in NGOs are subvented by the government. I hope the administration would promise to increase the quota to alleviate the burden on grassroots families, so that female employees can be lifted out of the plight.
Mr. Kenneth Leung. President, this is the second reading debate on the Employment Amendment Bill 2019. The proposal is to increase maternity leave by 4 weeks in addition to the 10 weeks already granted. In terms of pay, it is equivalent to 4/5 of the wages of an employee. In the original bill, the cap is 36,822. I'm given to understand that the government will increase this to $80,000. There are two other technical amendments. First, miscarriage. It will be changed to before 24 weeks pregnancy. So for females who suffer from miscarriage, they will also be entitled to maternity leave. Also, the certificate of attendance issued by the healthcare practitioners will be accepted as documentary proof for entitling the eligible employee to sickness allowance. I understand that on the 12th of August 2018, the Secretary said in his blog that one of the focus of the Bureau's policy is to help the couples who want to have children to reduce the burden of childcare. And this is a conscious decision, and they should be assisted to take the conscious decision to have babies. And this is one of the work of the LWB. One of the purposes of this amendment bill is obviously to encourage childbirth on the part of the couples in Hong Kong. But by merely increasing the maternity leave, will we be able to achieve the purpose? There was a study in 2018 that shows it was conducted by the FYG, and it was a study on the increase in the fertility rate. We find something really interesting in this study. Of the 520 young people polled, those indicating having children is 1.41, and they want to have 1 to 2 children, and the number is 1.41 in the study. 5.8% of the people polled are of the view that a family should ideally be childless. 18.3% of these people said that they were not going to have any children. The improvement to the maternity leave, has it got any direct relationship with the population policy? In fact, to improve the environment for childbirth, other than the maternity leave being increased, I think the administration should also address the fundamental social problems. Obviously, in many families in Hong Kong, the parents are working exceedingly long hours. And the long hours of work will prevent them from having the opportunity to have children. After 8 or 10 or 11 hours of work, it would be hard for them to produce babies. Also, the childcare facilities are expensive, and the pay sometimes cannot cope with the expenses arising from childcare. The children will have to go to a lot of interest classes and tutorial classes. It would cost anything up to more than $10,000 per month. Let's take a middle-class family with 2 working parents. Now, if the couples are both working, do we have enough childcare facilities or day facilities to enable the couples to stay at work, so that there would be more resources for the children to go to their classes, music, dance classes, and so on, and they would be able to go to work with their mind at ease, and they leave their children in the care of the qualified child carers. This is something that was raised by many members here in this council. Another fundamental issue is the land supply and the housing supply. Mr. Leung. This bill is Employment Amendment Bill 2019. It is not a bill on childbirth. Please speak to the subject. This is not a bill on childbirth, but without childbirth, how can you be eligible for the benefits? Please come back to the subject. Yes, I bring myself back to this Employment Amendment Bill. Of course, I am delighted to see the increase in maternity leave to 14 weeks, but this is nowhere near enough. Let me share my own experience. President, with a remark that you made, I think I have to chuck my speech into the bin. I have to share with you my experience. 14 weeks of maternity leave, would it be enough? I don't think it is enough. If the mother has to nurse the baby, it would take 6 months for breastfeeding to enable the mother and the child to have good enough bondage and good enough nutrition. During the breastfeeding period, physically and mentally the mother would be under tremendous pressure. I understand that a couple of weeks ago we had a legislative amendment regarding discrimination against breastfeeding mothers in public places. But the most important thing is to have the corresponding leave period available for the mothers to have a choice to be with the newborns. It may not be necessarily be 4/5 of the wages. At least we should allow women a choice, let's say 8 to 10 weeks of no paid leave. And the employer will have to guarantee that the leave would be available to the women who are in need, and they cannot be concocting all manner of excuses to sack them. 8 to 10 weeks would be more in line with the practices in other jurisdictions. Except for the maternity leave, paternity leave for men is not enough either. I was chairman of the Committee on Paternity Leave last year. We did have a fair amount of discussion, and the legislation was passed. The leave has gone up from 3 days to 5 now. The father plays a lot of role in front of the newborn. The father has to buy a lot of baby products. He has to look after the mother, and there is a lot of mental support that the father can give. It would be difficult in a situation like Hong Kong. Secretary, when you next amend the employment ordinance, I hope that you will increase the paternity leave further to 7 days. If we manage to extend the paternity leave, then it's going to be a wonderful achievement on your part. The other issue is that under the employment ordinance, we may increase the period of leave for maternity leave and paternity leave for that matter. It doesn't mean to say that young couples are willing to have babies. President, I must say something about the impact that this bill will have on the productivity in Hong Kong. Not only is it a welfare policy, it is also something to do with the GDP in Hong Kong. The population is aging, not just in Hong Kong, in the mainland of China, because of the one-child policy. The peak will be something like 2035, whereas in Hong Kong, the peak we have gone past the peak. Please speak to the subject, Mr. Leung. We are not debating on the population policy. We're debating Employment Amendment Bill 2019. Yes, Employment Amendment Bill 2019 is not only a welfare policy, it is also a bill that has to do with the demographic structure and the economy in Hong Kong. So I feel that the Secretary not only should consider the leave, he should also consider other ways to encourage the intending couples to have babies. He should offer something like the cash incentive. We have the tax holiday. I'm talking about policy. Yes, we're talking about policy, but this is not relevant to the Employment Amendment Bill 2019. So please speak to the subject today. You've been talking about the leave for the women, the paternity leave, and the population policy. I think you have digressed from the subject for today. But President, let me say something about the process of enacting this piece of legislation. Mr. Leung Yu-jung has talked a lot about this. Let me come back to the bill itself. Under the employment ordinance, I'm wondering whether it is possible to offer any cash incentive, cash allowance for women or for the family. We have the tax policy here, President. You said that I cannot talk about the tax policy, but in the context of this employment amendment bill, can we offer cash allowance to the families? Let's say there is a newborn in the family. Can't we offer something like $50,000 or $80,000 of cash allowance instead of just a tax deduction? With tax deduction, it will take an awful long time. Mr. Leung, I think you have digressed from the Employment Amendment Bill 2019. For policy, you can take it up on some other occasions. President, I won't make any more suggestions then. I'd like to find out from the Secretary that he's going to make a speech later on that the cap will go up from $36,822 to $80,000. That's about an upward adjustment of 200%. Why is it within such a short period of time he has made such a decision? $36,822 in the original proposal. How did you arrive at that? Why did you push it up by 200%? Why are you so generous all of a sudden? I look forward to your reply in your speech later on today. I hope you will explain to me the mechanism for calculation. Why not 100,000 and why 80,000? President, you are of the view that my speech is not speaking to the bill. I just hope that the bill will be amended in a way that it will address the demographic structure in Hong Kong and with a view to increasing the productivity. Thank you.
Mr. Luk Chung-hong. Mr. President, I'm speaking on the Employment Amendment Bill 2019. I support the amendment to the bill and also the second reading of the bill. The main purpose of this bill is to extend maternity leave to 40 weeks so that it will be a paid leave. And it has accepted the suggestion made by Mr. Chi-kwong from the FTU. That is for the additional 4 weeks paid maternity leave, the employer will be able to get up to $80,000 subsidy from the administration. So the administration has taken on board good advice, and therefore we should commend it. But then there has been question about why there should be this cap. All right, let's say if the pay is at $100,000, and then if you multiply that, in fact, for the $80,000 subsidy, it will already cover over 99% of the female workers. And then for those earning more than $100,000, we believe that the employers have the obligation or moral responsibility to take up or to top up that instead of asking the administration to top it up without any cap. So for somebody earning more than $10 million or having a monthly pay of $100,000, how can we expect the administration to reimburse over $100,000 or $1 million? And therefore, for those earning high salaries, it should not have been the taxpayers subsidizing their maternity leave. And then on miscarriage, it's also been updated to 24 weeks. It's also in line with the Hong Kong College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists for women who have to go for antenatal examination, so long as they can get the certificate of attendance, they'll be able to get sickness allowance. So it's not much, but then it would definitely help. We believe that this amendment has significant meaning because it's an incentive for people to have more children, and it's also a family-friendly policy. And then from the labor sector, the FTU has been fighting for this for many years, and it's the outcome of our hard work. And with the extension of the MLP, that would also prevent postnatal depression, because many women are having a lot of stress, and according to studies, some 10 to 15% of the women would suffer from postnatal depression, in particular during the 10th to the 15th week. And if the MLP can be extended so that they can have better rest and adjustment, then they would recover more readily, and then they would be able to go back to work earlier. And then for breastfeeding is also a government policy, and if there are 14 weeks altogether, then they will be better. They will be able to better prepare themselves for breastfeeding. So extension of MLP should not have been a controversial subject in this council. How come this council can only debate it in the second last council meeting, and there are some women groups outside there that are very worried? Will we be able to pass it? Well, we will have to ask the opposition camp and also the Burn With Me camp, because just now when I heard Mr. Leung Yiu-chung said he did not dare to admit, I think he's calling thief. I think we will have to expose it because it's the opposition camp who had been playing foul, because Mr. Leung Yiu-chung questioned that, okay, it's good that we can pass this, and he actually had been asking the bureau director to take this bill, to present this bill to the council. So you're actually challenging our memory. You think we would be so forgetful that we would not remember? In fact, since Dennis Kwok had taken over the chairmanship in the election of the chairman for the House Committee, well, there were 17 meetings, and it took him 10 months. So we had not been able to elect a chairman, and as a result, we had not been able to pass this Employment Amendment Bill 2019. Everybody knows it. How come he still have the nerve? He still had the nerve to say that we did not follow the rules. Well, the opposition camp never follow the rules. Well, what they like to say is that, so long as they can achieve justice, it's okay for them to do whatever they want. So for Dennis Kwok, it's nothing wrong to hold up the election of the chairman. In fact, they've also swear their allegiance to the PRC and also the Hong Kong SARG and also the Basic Law and the PRC. But then in the national anthem law, they filibustered using unethical means, and they've actually tried to hijack the passage of this bill as a means to block the passage of the national anthem bill. Had Mr. Leung not mentioned this, I would not have exposed their wrongful deeds. All right, we are very familiar with the rules of procedure, and under 54.4, we have the chance to salvage this bill. And as a result, at the manpower panel, we scrutinized it very carefully, and we did go through the clause-by-clause examination. And as a result, we've been able to resume the second reading of this bill, or else it would be like the anti vacant flat tax. We would not have been able to pass it. So that's because of the filibustering by the opposition camp. And Leung Yiu-chung actually claimed that he represented the workers' interests. That's why, because his organization said that they would not be fielding any candidates for the upcoming legislative election. All right, they have not been supported by the public anyway. All right, for workers' rights, we've been doing this for a long time. So the last amendment to this bill was 24 years ago, and there had been several generations of council members, Chen Yun-han, Wong Kwok-heng, Kwong Chi-kin, Yip Wai-ming, Poon Pui-kau, and Bill Tang, and so on and so forth. On top of that, many of us who were very concerned about workers' rights and also women's rights and so on, we've been fighting for a long time for their rights. In fact, there is always room for improvement, and with society's development, I hope that this is a milestone, but then this is not the end of the story. In particular, when it comes to women's rights, when it comes to childbirth, it's really very hard. Women are subject to a lot of pressure and stress because they had to take up the due task of working moms and also working women. And therefore, we hope that we can have a brand new arrangement for maternity leave. So it's not sick leave, and they should not have to have their pay deducted by 20%. In fact, even on the mainland, they've been able to do this, and we should also review further and extend maternity leave. Well, in Singapore, it's 16 weeks, and then on the mainland, it's 14 weeks plus different arrangements in different provinces and cities. In some cases, they have an extra 4 weeks. So in most cases, there would be more than 14 weeks. But then, most importantly, it's about the security of job after giving birth. So upon resumption of your job after taking maternity leave, sometimes you might not be able to restart your work. For example, there might be adaptation problems and also breastfeeding and also psychological and physical adjustments. So the employer will have to be more accommodating to those new moms. But then some employers are unscrupulous. They would just dismiss the women who just return to work after giving birth. There might be all sorts of reasons. Sometimes it's unreasonable dismissal, and therefore we will have to ensure that there would be reasonable legal protection so that for women going back to work after giving birth, they would be able to have a sense of security, and there should be less stress so that they would not be struggling between families and their work, and then there would be less risk of suffering from postnatal depression. And therefore, with regard to the security of job after giving birth, we should come up with further arrangement. And last but not least, men should also help their wives after giving birth, and therefore we hope that paternity leave can also be extended by at least 2 days. So on the extension of paid maternity leave, I think there is something that should be looked into further. So for the extra 4 weeks, all right, the administration is going to fund it. So we're talking about $500 million a year. Well, it's not that substantial, and yet it's not a small amount either. But then what's the best arrangement? I think if we want to see it through for the benefit of women, I think it's a worthy attempt. It's a good attempt, including the fact that we're going to scrap the offsetting arrangement for MPF. So I think this offsetting arrangement should be scrapped in order to protect the interests of the employees, and this is good. So here I'd like to say this to the business sector and also the employer members. So you're asking the administration to foot the bill. In fact, that should not have been taken for granted. The employers should also chip in. It should not have been taken as if the administration should foot the bill anyway, because taxpayers' money is involved. And taxpayers include those who are salaried and also those running a business. And then there are also other sources of revenue like land sales and so on. So this is public money, and we are talking about public finance. And when it comes to employees' rights, well, everything should have come from the employer because they are working for you and they are helping you make money. So the most ideal way out is for the employer to foot the bill. But then in Hong Kong, we have this problem. That is for the SMEs. They are actually very vulnerable to the exploitation by the developers, in particular the major developers, and therefore the administration has no alternative but to come up with such reimbursement arrangements. But then, as I said, this should not have been. This should not become a norm. So I hope that the business sector can have a more open mind so that they would be prepared to share the cost for this. Because after all, Hong Kong has a low tax regime, and this is where our competitiveness lies. And of course, we should also introduce a tax for the super rich and also the super high profit tax for people like Li Ka-shing earning billions of dollars a year. They should have paid higher tax. But then in the end, we cannot avoid this problem. That is, where does the money come from? Well, how should we distribute wealth? And then in terms of initial distribution of wealth, employers should also play their roles. The reason why we have to offer the working family allowance and so on. Please speak to the subject. I think this is very important, President, because for the paid maternity leave, for the extra 4 weeks, is funded by the administration. And therefore, I hope that we can all look into this. This is food for thought because it's about social justice and also social harmony. And I believe that only when there is justice in our society, so that different quarters of a community, including the working class, of course, we will have to hang on to our jobs. We will have to work hard. But then this is hard-earned money. And then for those running business, you have a very good business environment. You are visionary, and that's why you make money. But then you should also be more committed to the benefits of the employees. Only then will we have social harmony, and then one country, two systems will become more successful. So I hope that for the Employment Amendment Bill 2019 is going to be one of the biggest achievements in this term of the Council. But then I hope that in the coming months and years, we will be focused on employees' interests and also people's livelihood instead of making a mess of our lives and just focusing on politics. This is the best interest of workers. Thank you.
Mr. Lau Kwok Fan. Thank you, Mr. President. This bill relates to maternity leave for female employees. In short, the bill proposes to increase ML by 4 weeks, and a cap would be imposed in respect of the extension of ML and shortening the period of miscarriage from before 28 weeks to before 24 weeks of pregnancy. We should give support to this bill. Some members referred to the procedures, and it's really baffling to say that the administration had actually delayed the procedure by referring the bill to the panel on manpower instead of the House Committee before resuming second reading of the bill. I don't think they've taken into account our wish for the bill to be passed as soon as possible. But unfortunately, after 17 weeks of meeting at the House Committee, the chair of the House Committee could still not be elected. This had led to a lot of work of the Council, including the scrutiny of bills, to come to a standstill. Under such circumstances, alternatives were explored to make sure that people's livelihood would not be affected. And I think the opposition, before making criticisms, should really mull over this question and consider who is actually in the wrong. For a long time, Hong Kong has 10 weeks of maternity leave. It has long been criticized for lagging behind other countries. Now we are bringing ourselves on a par with other countries by increasing the period by 4 weeks. But we're still a far way away from other countries, despite the step taken. The last amendment was made 37 years ago. Time is ripe to keep ourselves up with the times and pass the amendment. It has been as long as 37 years. 37 years ago, social culture was different. Women tended to stay home to take care of the children, whilst men went out to work. Even if women had to work, flexible arrangements would be kept in place to make sure women could go home and look after the children. But nowadays, things are very different from what happened 37 years ago. We see high-ranking officials, even the chief executive, being women. We have many important tasks taken up by women. So when we have working parents, it's very difficult to make time to take care of the children. And it is difficult to give up the job and give up the means of living just to take care of children. I don't think 14 weeks of ML are sufficient. But I don't think this bill can take a big leap in catching up with the rest of the world. So I'm going to support this bill. At a macro level, we have late marriages and the low birth rate. This is not something new, but in the long term, it would affect our human capital. With the rapidly aging population, there is a more severe shortage of manpower. There is a need to encourage births. Maternity leave is not one reason for having more children, but indeed, extending the period of ML can help them alleviate the burden so that they can give it a thought. There is also one important element in the amendment bill. That is the definition of miscarriage. It's been updated from before 28 weeks of pregnancy to before 24 weeks of pregnancy, which means that in the past, women must go through 28 weeks of pregnancy before being entitled to sick leave in the case of a miscarriage. Now it's 24 weeks. It's a bit late that we see this amendment, but it is necessary. If we compare ourselves to other countries, many countries have already adopted the definition of before 24 weeks of pregnancy. Even for Hong Kong, the medical profession defines the formation of a fetus to 24 weeks of pregnancy, and any surgery relating to miscarriage should be carried out before 24 weeks of pregnancy. In other words, this definition of pregnancy before 24 weeks of pregnancy is quite widely recognized. So I think it's reasonable to update the definition of miscarriage. I think we should support this amendment. 24 weeks translates as 6 months of pregnancy. It's a rather long period. Basically, it's quite visible with 6 months of pregnancy. If unfortunately a woman suffers from miscarriage after 6 months of pregnancy, it will have a great impact physically and mentally on the mother. Definitely, we need to give her time to recuperate and recover both mentally and physically. If the female employee is not entitled to ML, that means the female employee will need to use her own annual leave, which is very often not a long period, just 8 days, not enough for them to recuperate. So, if these unfortunate mothers do not enjoy maternity leave, it will have a great impact physically and mentally on their well-being. Be it extending the ML from 10 to 14 weeks or updating the definition of miscarriage, I would say that all these are good deeds. Still, there is room for improvement. For example, female employees will only be entitled to 4/5 of the average daily wages. This is the status quo at the moment without any amendment. I understand, of course, that this will pose heavier costs on employers to pay the absent employee on leave. But if we draw reference from the ML arrangements in other places such as the mainland, Singapore, France, Taiwan, these female employees enjoy full ML pay. So I think we should bring ourselves on a par with international practices so that the government can be perceived as attaching importance to the female employees' rights. I hope that the government can take up this view and further improve the arrangement in the future. We also agree with other arrangements under the bill. For example, for the extension of ML of 4 weeks, it will be subject to a cap of $80,000 instead of $36,822, and that the government will allow reimbursement of female employees having monthly salaries of up to $100,000. Under the new arrangement, female employees having a higher income will also be eligible for the statutory ML pay. This is a good deed. But we're leaving out the 1%, and I wonder whether we can cover the small proportion as well. The government should give it a thought. There may be different considerations financially by these families. With a cut of 20% of household income, it may have a great impact on their family, even if the parent is a high-income earner. In terms of support for pregnant women, I think the government should further improve the relevant measures. Next is about implementation timetable. According to the bill, it will come into operation at the end of this year because offices will need to be set up and funding approval from LegCo will have to be secured. I don't think this is good enough. This is a good policy and should be implemented as soon as possible. These are procedural glitches that can be resolved. So I hope the bill can come into operation as soon as it is passed. I hope the government can rethink. According to the Cap 1 of the according to Cap 1 RGCO, the government can designate a date of operation of any piece of legislation. And I think at least certain parts of the bill can be done this way. For example, entitlement to sick leave allowance and updating the definition of miscarriage. These do not directly relate to statutory ML pay. And if we could overcome the technical difficulties, these areas can come into operation sooner than planned after passage of the bill. I hope the Secretary would respond to these ideas in a moment. I support this bill, all in all. Despite the hiccups, we're towards the end of this term of LegCo. This is the second last meeting in this term. And in fact, I'm worried that the opposition camp might ask for quorum counts and suspend the meeting so that ultimately this bill cannot be passed. However, the pro-establishment camp will spare no effort to ensure the passage of this bill so as not to disappoint the prospective parents. It's only right to provide better protection to female pregnant employees. So, even if you want to be mutually destructive, we only have 2 meetings left and 2 weeks left before the end of our term. I urge those members to mend their ways and help pass a bill for female employees and pregnant employees to be given more protection. Thank you.
Mr. Wong Ting-kwong. Thank you, Madam Deputy. Madam Deputy, myself and everyone here in this chamber has a mother who gave birth to us. It is a really great achievement for mothers to give birth. Not only do they carry on the family line, they enable humankind to continue into the future and to make improvement. So the whole society, up and down, the society should give due care to women who get pregnant. This bill is before us for debate. I think it is way too late. I remember 20, 30 years ago, in the company that I served, it offered paid maternity leave to women. It's only today that we are trying to lengthen the maternity leave from 10 weeks to 14 weeks. A few moments ago, some members said that it is the employer's responsibility to extend the length of the maternity leave. As I said right at the beginning, this is a collective social responsibility. Giving birth to babies is not doing so for the employer, it is doing so for the families, for society. I think the employer should give due care to the pregnant women and the pregnant employees. The government is going to shoulder the additional financial burden. I think that the government can go further than that. Can they offer 100%? If the government is taking up the lion's share, what about the employers who will be making up for the shortfall? Can't we offer some tax incentives to the employers who are financially capable to go further and offer further benefits to the pregnant employees and offer them better care and services? So this is not something just for the LWB. What about the Treasury? What about the FSTB? Can't you put on your thinking cap and see what you can do proactively in the way of the taxation system? The Bureau has already considered the bill, and there are some improvements there in the way of miscarriage and so on. we have seen some favorable changes there in the bill, but there is one thing which is lacking here in this package. We are talking about the working women. What about the housewives? The housewives are working exceedingly hard as well. Their life is tough. So as housewives, they're not entitled to maternity leave because they're not on a payroll. Shouldn't the government take a step further and consider them as well? If the spouse of a housewife can be given more benefits in terms of salaries tax, for instance, for the sake of human society, for the sake of improvement in human society, fertility is important. We keep complaining about the lack of manpower. I think the government ought to do something more. The previous two chief executives did urge the Hong Kong people to give births more. But I mean, it is difficult to give birth in the first place. It's even more difficult to raise a child. For the young couple to give birth to a baby, they have to mull over the prospect, they have to mull over the burden, the financial burden, and so on. They can't abandon the babies to their own devices. So I feel that the Labour and Welfare Bureau ought to do more, and this is only good for Hong Kong. I cannot help say this. The pro-destruction members are making remarks that are really awful to our ears. This bill is presented here for resumption debate. This has been dragging on for an awful long time because they have turned the House Committee upside down. We came back in October last year, and it's taken 7 months without the House Committee being formed. It was so difficult to elect the chairman of the House Committee. It was even more difficult to pay a pilgrimage to the West. This bill has circumvented the House Committee. They complain that this has circumvented the House Committee. What House Committee? Where do we have the House Committee? In their wisdom, some members try to present this to the Manpower Panel for deliberation of this bill. And eventually we could bring this back to this council for the resumption of second reading debate. They have done something good, but you drag them through the gutter by calling them authoritative and by saying that they do not observe the due process. What process do you observe? The way you manipulated the House Committee election. What justice was there? I think you have to look yourself in the mirror. In the eyes of the pro-destruction members, either you're with me. If you're not with me, you're against me. And you try to manipulate the situation the way you want it without any regard to justice. I hope that the whole of Hong Kong will peel their eyes I find it wholly surprising here. At the last meeting, there was a member by the name Kwok who said that in the mainland of China in 2012, they've already commenced on the 14-day maternity leave.
And then in 2018, the Hong Kong South government in the report stated that now the bill will receive a second and third reading, and then it can only be implemented next year. So women in Hong Kong have been waiting for 3 years. This is extremely shameful. They like to attack mainland China, black-mouthing it, and I don't know why they have mentioned this point. Hong Kong has lagged behind China or mainland in this regard. Hong Kong is shameful. All right, we finally have this bill, but for their own personal reasons, they have called halt to everything in this council and in Hong Kong. They couldn't care less how evil they are. I really hope that the You Burn With Us members will not continue to do this. They should walk their talk. They should not use specious argument to pull wool over the eyes of members of the public. On the 18th of April this year, the Council approved the second round of anti-epidemic fund at a cost of $137 billion. On that day, the You Burn With Us members voted against the proposal. 7 members from the Democratic Party were present. They all opposed the bill or the proposal. Members from the pro-establishment camp greatly supported the proposal. The proposal was passed by a margin of 41 to 22 with 2 abstentions. However, many who were involved in this campaign against the mainland and to create chaos in Hong Kong had the shamelessness to apply for relief under the fund. So I hope the bill can receive its second and third reading smoothly, and I hope the administration can implement the policy the soonest possible. Thank you, Madam Deputy.
蔣麗芸議員。
Dr. N. Cheng. Thank you, Deputy President. Well, this proposed employment amendment bill by extending the maternity leave by 4 more weeks to 14 weeks. I strongly endorse this because we allow the newborn mothers with more time to recuperate and taking care of their newborns. I don't disagree with the administration that by extending the maternity leave, you encourage more women to give birth. Well, the Secretary is in the best position to know. Well, in those young people's forum, for the demands and aspirations they raised, they mostly mentioned about their housing issue, and more recently, and also employment. So last year, fresh graduates and this year graduates have very high underemployment rate. So whether they can get a job offer and take care of themselves, and they're worried about it, well, let alone for those who are married, you're granting them a few more days of leave to give birth to another baby. That's impossible. I recall more than a decade ago, there's some professionals did the math. Well, it costs $4 million to raise a child. Well, would $4 million be enough after a decade? Well, unless we all rely on government handouts, if not, well, the professionals want to raise their child by their own means. Probably $4 million not enough. I wouldn't say too much. Probably around $5 to $6 million nowadays, if you provide it with the best education and try to nurture them. So for the secretary claiming that by granting 4 more weeks of maternity leave, then will encourage women to give birth. That's impossible. Well, secretary, it's not easy raising a child. Well, in fact, besides providing the compulsory education, what else have they done for the young generation? And how they feel that the government is really helping them? A lot of the young people, they're not happy. Well, you claim their economy is booming. How they share the fruit? They couldn't feel it. Well, you claim the government taking well care of them, or cares much about them, hope that they can have more outward mobility. Well, you should show them the way, and yet you're not doing it. In fact, on the other hand, if you're not showing them the way, there are more likelihood of them for downward mobility. So I'm really concerned. Well, Secretary, well, after joining the government, well, I'm not especially demanding of you other than asking for that $10,000 cash handout. Maybe my caucus members would be more demanding. I hope that in most difficult time, I hope you can provide cash handouts to grassroots families and the unemployed, well, which I mentioned casually. While some political parties will even object to the $10,000 handout. Well, never mind, we're not talking about this today. Well, Secretary, as you recall, I had very seriously sat down with you repeatedly. Do you remember what it's about? You do, right? The baby fund, Secretary. Well, you definitely have a higher IQ than me. Well, I admit I'm not as smart as you. Well, for the baby fund proposal, didn't like idea didn't explode one day when I got out of bed. We studied seriously for quite a few years and also take reference to other regions and countries with their success and failures. And will they borrowing for their strong points to crafting this proposal. I would discuss with the chief executive and also with the chief secretary and also with the financial secretary. I've been showing them the same proposal, asking them to do more for the next generation. Well, frankly, the CE, we asked you to find chief secretary, and chief secretary asked me to look for the financial secretary, and the FS asked me to look for the secretary. Well, you're the official responsible. You didn't. I thank you for not asking me to look for the undersecretary. I often feel that for a young child, the moment he is born, he or she doesn't come with anything. If they come from a better background, let's say they own a property, maybe I can just give you a flat. For those with less means, from the grassroots level, well, they don't own their own property. If the parents within life, their public housing flat will be returned. Well, I received complaints of being evicted as both the parents passed away. While the government claimed that it could help them through other policy, well, sometimes they have a huge question mark over their own future. I couldn't feel how the government care about them. Well, instead of just lip service, just do it, prove it. Secretary, I suppose that you should respond a bit later. So my idea is simple. Just ask the young people these days and ask them to feel the government care about them. Well, maybe they were saying, oh, maybe free education, which they get the free education. Oh, and one more thing. Well, more recently, well, you offer them kind of tuition or books, textbook allowance per se, but is it adequate? But is there anything to get them excited about the future? I remember there was a song called I Got Nothing. Well, a few years back, there was a children commit suicide because he claimed that he or she doesn't own anything. But so what can we do? We'll keep proposing to the government of setting up a new generation baby fund. Well, for this baby fund, for each newborn, not just extra 4 weeks of maternity leave or give a few more days of paternity leave. It's just for the baby. For each newborn, couldn't we set up an account for each newborn, which the government can inject an amount, maybe $10,000 or $20,000 as a seeding money? Maybe we can contribute on a matching basis until the baby reached 18. I see that this proposal not only can plan ahead, when allow families with different circumstances who have the chance to close the narrative poverty gap, or even to relieve the intergeneration poverty. So they'll have more hope when they grow up instead of owning nothing, zero. Hope that the children could more proactively embrace the future. Well, Secretary, in different countries there are different policies in place to encourage women giving births. Well, a lot of places are even offering incentive money, so there are more money and prizes, money and gifts. Well, take Japan, for example. Well, some women, upon confirming the pregnant more than 4 months, for the first baby, they got 420,000 yen of subsidy. And in Hungary, they'll allow mother having more than 4 children will not waive the income tax for life. And a family with 3 or more children will subsidize to buy a caravan, a 7-seater. Well, maybe the Secretary claimed that Hong Kong will also raise the tax allowance for the children. By comparison, we hope that the Hong Kong women can really set aside their career to make more babies in Hong Kong and to boost our future labor supply, I think you should brainstorm more ways and attractive policies. Well, in terms of the other policies in encouraging childbirths, well, it comes to all sorts and manners. Well, I can't elaborate them one by one. As for the baby fund proposal, Singapore, for example, in 2001 onwards, they have this something like this. And do you know how many have joined this scheme? Well, 2001 to 2005, there are 97%. In 2006 to 2003, there are 95%. It shows that this scheme is very popular. Well, it's not that Hong Kong's and have something like that. Well, we have the Child Development Fund. Well, it's been formed for 12 years, and how many members took part? 17,000 people. Well, by comparison, it's a very small base. And yet you only select those from the grassroots. So after a few years, that it still exists, I have no idea. And you only allow you to develop personal interests and go some hobby classes. This is just commonplace. Instead, the DAB have proposal of the newborn generation fund is a lifetime asset accumulation plan. If necessary, they can use it for education and health care, or even a retirement, because some may not tap into this fund, and this baby fund can merge with the MPF. There will be a bigger account. Well, for the MPF, well, a lot of people doesn't really have much hope on it. Well, they probably don't think they can rely on it upon retirement, and some will estimate that they will exhaust the MPF 10 years after retirement. I believe, well, for the next financial year, I hope the Secretary can reconsider this baby fund. Well, to incentivize the young generation to give birth, they need to feel the government is really want to nurture their offspring. Well, a very nice plan like the baby care fund, if the idea is good, I believe that they could truly encourage the young families to have one or two more children, and also bring more hope to them. And most importantly, we need to let the next generation feel that the government truly cares for them. Thus, Secretary, whether in future or whether from my colleagues and in the future, they will continue to follow up on this future baby fund. I so submit.
胡志偉議員。
Mr. Wu Chi-wai.